So you've kind of, I mean, it sounds like you've kind of given up hope on making internal changes, and now you're relying on, I guess, the judge in the New York case, because obviously the attorney general, certainly the NRA would say, and I think a lot of gun rights advocates would agree, that she is not in it to save the NRA by any means, right? She would just as soon see it dissolved and send its money to other groups than have it reformed. But perhaps so I guess the reliance here is on the judge making a good decision. Is that where you're laying your hope now?
I think there's two thoughts here. One is when you're in a battle and your enemy is defeating themselves, stay out of their way. And I think that's part of what the Attorney General in New York is doing, is just giving the NRA time, because as time continues to pass, the NRA is not getting stronger. And then the second part is that the Attorney General's her charge, in terms of the removing LaPierre, removing Frazier, and then restitution from the four, Powell, Phillips, LaPierre, and Frazier. Then it's a question of, what, if any, structural changes would the judge do? Rocky Marshall has put out several posts, forecasting
another former board member,
looking at revenues and forecasting that the association is on trend for bankruptcy, and that the bankruptcy judge would be the best answer. The question is, will the NRA either just as in the course of operations, in terms of their declining revenue and increasing legal costs, cross that bankruptcy threshold, or will the costs that would be incurred by the association post resolution of the New York case or the DC case drive the NRA into bankruptcy? Because the only way to me to reform the board is number one, you have to abolish the executive council. Because the executive council is that group of predominantly former presidents who, to me, that is the real board of the NRA. They're the ones who make the decisions.
And how many people are on that right now?
7 or 8.
Because one of the key complaints about the NRA's management is that the board is too big, right? There's 76 board members. A lot of them aren't
a nonprofit,
heavily involved.
In a nonprofit, you have what is typically called the fundraising board. And that is what the 76 directors are. Their job is to do what they're told and raise money. And then you have but they are all fiduciaries under New York law.
Right.
So they're all liable for the actions of the association. And then you'll have a smaller group that tends to be the decision-making board, and that's the executive committee, of which there are 20 members. But the executive committee only meets in between regular board meetings where there's a decision that has to be made on a timely basis. And it's to me, that's they don't meet very frequently at all. But the executive council takes no minutes. They're like the special litigation committee. There are no minutes, so there is no transparency to the board for what deliberations go on. An example would be the first vice president of the NRA, Willis Lee, was removed. He was not put back in place at the board meeting on Monday. Bob Barr was elected first vice president, and part of that came from the resolution to extend Charles Cotton another year. Came from the Special Litigation Committee. And then that was then endorsed by the Executive Council in its communication to the board. And so that was okay, we're doing this. And then, throughout the board meeting and the committee meetings last week, Willis Lee went from being first vice president to not being an officer.
Right.
And
which is very unusual too.
It's very unusual, and again, that's I'll say a lack of transparency. I think Willis posted on Facebook that the nominating committee report was slipped under his door, and so he found out he was out as first vice president by a note that was shared with all board members being slipped under his door.
That's a common thing too. The whole slipping under the door,
yeah.
The ballot stuff. Like that's another thing that's happens commonly at these meetings, right?
Well, that's where there's a small group of people that make a decision, and then they communicate the decision to the board, and the board is expected to approve it.
Yeah, it's sort of something out of a movie, but that's how it actually operates.
Yeah, and that dissent is not even debate is not. It's rubber stamp, rubber stamp, rubber stamp. So to me, the board does not operate as a board in terms of governing the association. The executive council really governs the association. The board is kept busy. It's busy work that benefits the members and benefits the association, but it keeps them away from any of the true governing of the association.